With all the lockdowns happening in Australia, it is very hard to keep a positive, optimistic, future focused perspective. We, of course, do need to remember that compared to all other areas of the globe, Oceania, and we might as well take New Zealand into the calculations here, are managing the pandemic extremely well. Oceania has 35 COVID deaths per 1 million residents. This compares to around 1,500 COVID deaths per 1 million residents in the US or in Europe. South America even has 2,600 cases per 1 million residents of death. So this is much, much higher. We're doing it incredibly well from a save the population perspective. We are, of course, hurting our economy with all those lockdowns. Absolutely correct. And I think in order to keep the recovery in mind, I focused on three specific issues that make me optimistic when I look into the future of Australia. The first one is actually the demographic profile. We have this big millennial cohort that saved us from the immediate impacts of the pandemic simply because the millennial cohort, the largest cohort, happened to be in this stage of the life cycle where they purchased housing. This is the highest spending phase of the life cycle. Millennials, just by dumb luck, entered the phase in this life cycle. So we do have at least very high spending in the economy at the moment. That saves Australia quite a bit. So that's wonderful. International students will return. As soon as the pandemic is over, international students will come back to Australia. That is very important because they bring money, but also because they revive and re-liven the inner cities. The inner cities are, of course, the areas of the cities that suffered the most because we work from home. We don't go in the city center to work anymore. International students that in Australia happen to live in the inner city overwhelmingly, they are gone. So the inner city is a bit of a ghost town at the moment. And international students will return simply because the demand for international education hasn't shrunken over the pandemic. The kind of jobs that we grew during the pandemic were knowledge work jobs, were these kind of jobs that require university level education. Overall, the whole world is actually shifting towards more and more knowledge work, those workers that need uni education. The US lost ground as an attractive university or tertiary education destination. You just need to have listened to, the anti-immigrant rhetoric under President Trump. That frightens away a couple of international students. Those guys go elsewhere, largely Canada and Australia, once this will return back to normal. So that's good news for the economy. The other idea is that international talent will come back. And that's a difficult question because in a sense we decide how much international talent we let into the country. How many skilled workers do we need in order to grow the economy? At the moment we experience massive skill shortages in Australia. Our federal budget allowed for quite a bit of investment into big scale infrastructure, and at the moment we do not have enough workers to fill all of those jobs. Sure enough, we can through the TAFE system, make sure that we upskill certain people, the couple of unemployed people, into these sectors. We can ensure that the current cohort of high school graduates, as fast as possible, go through a high quality TAFE program to fill those jobs. But there's a time delay with this, so we will need international talent back rather soon. Will international talent want to come to Australia? The answer is probably yes, simply because there are other areas that are not managing the world all that well. If I was to think of Hong Kong, for example, if I'm a youth or relatively young worker in Hong Kong and I see how my freedoms are being depleted, I'm probably keen to leave. Similar trends are the case for other regions of the globe. If I am a young worker in my 20s or 30s in Europe and I'm seeing the aging population there and absolutely no interest in increasing migration into Europe, I'm thinking I am the one who's paying for an aging population that is not willing and has the political clout to not shrink pensions. I'm thinking, no, I'm going to be taxed to death there, so I might as well go to Australia where the tax regime is relatively more in the favor of the worker. So that probably makes sure that we have the workers' return. What about international capital flows? That's the more complicated question. International capital is super keen to invest a lot of money into a lot of different things around the globe. Part of this is a Canadian pension fund, a Norwegian sovereign wealth fund. Those guys have to invest billions and billions of dollars, and increasingly they try to look for investments outside of Europe, outside of America, simply because border migration pressures on those countries become a bit more difficult. There is cultural unrest in the United States that makes the economy a bit more unstable. Political uncertainties in a highly divided political landscape. So all of these things probably point to the big investors seeking capital investment outside of the current top fields. So they go for relatively, secure economies to invest in. Ideally, democracies, industrialized democracies with decent population growth. There are not that many around. And just by that, Australia is a top destination for international capital flows. I added a bit more about the migration pressures in my column this week. But overall, I do think that we have enough positives going on in Australia that we can actually focus or take the focus away from the daily COVID update numbers and concentrate a bit on what is ahead. Because if you plan for the decade ahead right now, you have an advantage because you move while everyone else is just trying to survive. So right now is the correct phase to strategize, to make investments, and to boldly plan for Australia's futures. Once again, more about this in my column in the New Daily this week. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and there'll be more in the coming weeks.